Post-World War II marked the beginning of the Cold War, a rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union that saw the development and stockpiling of nuclear weapons by both superpowers. The arms race heightened the fear of an upcoming nuclear war, and both sides scrambled to find any advantage they could over the other. The Korean War raised concerns about brainwashing and mind control. There were reports of American prisoners being subjected to psychological manipulation during their capture and making anti-American statements after their release. There were many suspicions surrounding the ability to lower resistance against telling the truth, inducing specific actions or behaviors, and leaving subjects with no memory of certain incidents or interrogations. The United States were terrified by the thought of communist countries researching and developing mind control techniques. Being able to brainwash citizens into believing the communist agenda, or any agenda, was an extreme power. The belief was that if the US did not explore these avenues as well, they would be at a disadvantage. This led to the creation of the CIA in 1947. The goal was to gather and analyze information. Project MKUltra was officially signed and begun in 1953. The overall aim was to understand more about the human mind by finding ways to manipulate thoughts, alter personalities, influence moods and emotions, and control the behavior and actions of individuals. MKUltra was one of the largest projects ever known, being handled by over 80 different institutions including mental hospitals, universities, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies, all of which had little to no idea that they were working for the CIA. There were over 150 sub-projects, each with their own specific focus and objectives. One sub-project of MKUltra was called QK Hilltop. It was difficult for the CIA to find ideal agents that were intelligent and skilled enough to carry out operations. These traits are often found in principled agents who might hesitate to engage in morally questionable activities. This led to the CIA's attempt to create the perfect soldier, an assassin with heightened focus and efficiency, and whose memory could be selectively erased. This agent would be able to seamlessly navigate society while executing covert operations without retaining any recollection of their actions. Achieving this involved experimentation with various techniques, including using hypnosis, which was brought on by verbal suggestions, fixation on a specific object, or guided imagery. Subjects were also placed in environments that were designed to limit their senses. This involved isolation tanks filled with salt water, where subjects floated in complete darkness and silence. In other cases, subjects were confined to small, soundproof rooms with no stimuli. Sensory deprivation was believed to induce a state of psychological stress and vulnerability so that the subject would be more open to suggestion and manipulation. Many subjects were also exposed to electroconvulsive therapy, which involved electric shocks to the brain to cause seizures. Electrodes were placed on the subject's scalp and controlled electric currents were passed through the brain to study the impact of the seizures on the mind. Another sub-project was Operation Midnight Climax, which took place in the 1970s and was designed to study the effects of LSD on unsuspecting people in real-life situations. These experiments took place in safe houses that were set up in various locations, including San Francisco and New York. These safe houses were disguised as normal hotels, but were equipped with two-way mirrors and recording devices to observe the subjects. Prostitutes were employed to lure men back to the safe house where the prostitutes would pour drinks for them. Unknown to the men was that the drinks contained LSD and CIA operatives were watching behind the mirrors. The prostitutes were paid well enough to not reveal that they were working for the CIA, and the men were unlikely to speak about the incident out of shame or confusion. The operation didn't end with the safe houses. It soon expanded to public restaurants, bars, and beaches, all on American citizens who had no idea they were a part of an experiment. Operation Midnight Climax was meant to observe how the substance would affect behavior, perceptions, and decision-making. Subproject 68, known as Project Artichoke, was a precursor to MKUltra and focused on developing more effective interrogation techniques with an emphasis on improving the agency's ability to extract information. One significant aspect of this project was the development of truth serums, chemical substances that were believed to make detainees more likely to reveal accurate information. Project Artichoke extended to both American and Canadian citizens, who were used as test subjects without their knowledge or against their will. A notable location for these experiments was the Allan Memorial Institute in the 1950s and 1960s. Dr. Ewen Cameron played a pivotal role in conducting many of the experiments. His primary interest was gaining the ability to erase and reprogram a person's mind. The procedures carried out were very damaging, involving heavy dosages of mind-altering substances, medically induced comas, and electroshock therapy administered up to 75 times the usual intensity. Patients who initially went to him for treatment for symptoms of anxiety and depression left the hospital traumatized and with significant amnesia, having their minds wiped completely clean. Linda McDonald was 25 years old when she became one of Dr. Cameron's victims in 1963. She was a young wife and mother experiencing difficulties with depression. Within 1 month of her admission to the Allan Memorial Institute, McDonald was put into a barbiturate-induced coma in the sleep ward for 73 days. She was also given electroconvulsive therapy multiple times a day for weeks on end, a total of 109 sessions. They would shock her brain with 150 volts of electricity rapidly 6 times, then repeat the procedure only a few hours later. The effects were devastating. In a 1998 documentary, she stated that she had regressed to a state similar to that of a baby, lacking identity, memory, and basic functions. Upon her dismissal from the hospital and her return home, Linda McDonald had no recollection of her past life. Esther Schreier was another of Cameron's victims. She struggled with the grief of losing her first child, a girl who passed away when she was just 3 weeks old. Medical records show that Schreier felt that she was responsible for the loss. 2 years later, when she became pregnant again, she was still struggling with the guilt when she was admitted to the Allan Memorial Institute due to the anxiety over possibly losing another baby. During her 30 days in the sleep ward, Schreier was placed in a coma and was only awakened for 3 feedings and bathroom breaks daily. This resulted in her losing 13 pounds and becoming too weak to stand within 1 month. The purpose of the induced coma was part of Dr. Cameron's attempts to break down the patient's mental state to a childlike condition, where he could then start with a clean slate and reprogram the patient's mind. A key element of this reprogramming method was psychic driving. This involved playing recorded messages to patients for up to 20 hours a day while they were awake or asleep. These messages were delivered through headphones, helmets, or speakers, with some patients having the messages played directly inside their pillows. The content of these messages was repeated relentlessly, with records indicating that some patients would hear these messages up to 500,000 times. Even though Schreier was pregnant at the time, she still underwent 29 electroshock treatments, with most of them being of the same extreme intensity that Dr. Cameron used on other patients. The ECT treatments only stopped when she reached her 8th month of pregnancy. The consequences of these extreme treatments were severe for Esther Schreier. After giving birth, she found herself completely helpless, unable to remember basic tasks like how to boil water, let alone how to care for a newborn. Dr. Ewen Cameron passed away in 1967 without the public having any idea of what he'd been doing over the past decade. The secrecy surrounding MKUltra and the lack of public knowledge about its activities for so many years contributed to the shock and outrage when details of the program eventually began to emerge. In 1953, Frank Olson suffered a fatal fall from a New York City hotel at 2 o'clock in the morning. The initial police response suggested it was a self-inflicted incident, but many others found the circumstances unusual, and suspicions rose over the years. Later, investigations revealed that Olson had been involved in MKUltra. He had been a scientist specializing in aerosolizing biological agents during World War II and had continued his research with the CIA. Olson's involvement in the experiments eventually took a toll on his mental well-being as he became aware of the many unethical experiments conducted by the CIA. In 1975, the Rockefeller Commission exposed CIA activities. His family was invited to the White House, where they received an apology and a settlement from the U.S. government. In 1994, Olson's body was exhumed, and a second autopsy revealed blunt force trauma that happened prior to the fall that resulted in his death. This strongly suggested foul play. However, a legal agreement signed in 1975 prevented further legal action, but this didn't stop Olson's children from publicly accusing the CIA of causing their father's death and then covering it up. Although this is speculative, the CIA did release a handbook in 1953, the year of Olson's death, called The CIA Study of Assassination. Within the book is a section titled Accidents, and it describes that the most efficient assassination is a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface, as it causes little excitement and is only casually investigated. In 1964, MKUltra officially ceased its operations, and the program was reported to be discontinued. Records of the project were mostly destroyed in 1973 by Richard Helms, the director of the CIA at the time. Surprisingly, over 20,000 CIA documents linked to MKUltra were found, surviving due to being incorrectly stored. Despite this discovery, these documents are only a fraction of the complete picture. There's a widespread belief that the research and experiments never actually ended and continue today, simply under a different name, similar to how Project Bluebird turned into Project Artichoke and then into MKUltra. There are only 2 documented deaths that resulted directly from the testing, yet suspicions persist that there must have been many more fatalities, given the large number of subprojects and test subjects, as well as the brutality of the experiments. When CIA agents who were implicated in MKUltra underwent interrogation while attached to lie detectors, they all maintained they had no memory of the experiments and passed the polygraph tests. The lack of the comprehensive records and the secretive nature of the projects have fueled many conspiracy theories, and the mystery surrounding MKUltra may never be resolved. However, the exposure of the projects led to a new law being passed, mandating that people must always sign consent forms before taking part in any situation that could be potentially dangerous or invasive.